is it's more of a period piece. It's set in the late 60s, early 1970s. So, of course, I'm playing up the angle that things were starting to get where you would tell kids, like Ranger Danger, there's a stranger danger thing here, stranger danger thing there. But in smaller towns, a lot of times you find that your neighbors know each other so well, and everybody puts it above them. Oh, that could never happen. Here, that's being willfully ignorant of potential problems because, it's this guy got away with killing 20 kids, and because they get their kids out to get ice cream, and he decided to go under the guise of somebody that's going to sell them ice cream and do things for them, and ended up killing them, and got away with it because nobody ever suspected. And growing up, his life reminded me a lot of what you were talking about. He was charming. He came from a violent background himself. He was abused by his stepdad until he was about 16, and he killed his stepdad out of self-defense. But it was at that point the darkness had already come into him, and he couldn't part with it. Like, it gave him power because he saw the power in what he had done. Right. And that made him quest for it even more. So it was like an addiction, So.
And see, oftentimes we ignore these warning signs. And like I said, in retrospect, when we go back and look, they were present all the time.
Yeah, I agree with both of you 100%. I think that is one of those things that gets swept under the rug. And, Albert Fish, how many opportunities did people have to know that he was a twisted guy? He would get implicated in different things that were going on. It's not like he completely flew under the radar, and the cops would talk to him, and they'd say, he just seemed like such a nice guy. He didn't seem like the type of guy that could do anything like that. And it goes back to your don't judge a book by its cover point.
Right. Yeah, and it happens all the time. And remember earlier I mentioned the fact that during the 5 years I was in charge of the sex offense branch, 50% of my caseload was dealing with date rapes. And I would hear the same line over and over again. He's such a nice guy, I could not believe he would do something like that. And then you would find out later that they had what they thought was a casual meeting. This guy had been stalking them for quite a while. What they thought was, a random meeting was a staged meeting. And then everything that he had told them was not true, and they hadn't checked anything. And can you imagine, going to Albert Fish's house? They had a serial killer, a guy named Sowell up in Detroit. He killed over 11 women that he admitted to, and all he was doing was inviting them to his house, homeless women, to have a drink or a meal, and a serial killer. Dahmer, same thing. He'd meet these guys in a nightclub, take them to his place, drug them, kill them. Bundy, same thing. Nice guy. Bundy would walk around with a fake cast on his arm, pretending to be hurt, and ask somebody to open the door for him. As they would, he'd reach inside the cast and take out a tire iron, hit him in the head, throw him in the car. So again, we have to be extremely cautious with things that we think are routine when really it may be something staged and contrived. But my book says, don't speculate, investigate. That's what we need to do. We need to do more of that.
You talked a lot about, well, we both did, about how Albert Fish fit all these patterns that we think of when we think of serial killers, and we think of the things to look out for and all those things. Is there anything that, you kind of noticed about his case that was actually unique compared to other cases? Is there anything that stood out as maybe, that's different? You don't see that every day.
Well, I think I kind of took a different spin on it. It's happening every day. It's happening all around us. We're just not paying as much attention to it, because from my examination, Fish was doing the same thing that just about all the serial killers were doing. You have some serial killers who are opportunists. In other words, they just jump out the hedges, or they catch a door unlocked, or see something unattended and take advantage of it. But with your social predators like Fish, Dahmer, and a whole bunch of other serial killers, they go out of their way to meet their victims. Part of their game is, seeing how close they can get to them without people noticing. And then, unfortunately, a lot of, matter of fact, it was on the news just the other day, in Prince George's County, Maryland, they're trying to come up with something to help single mothers find daycare workers who somebody's done some sort of record check, because over the last year, I think they had 3 or 5 cases where boyfriends have killed infant children and sexually assaulted them. So, again, I think it's been going on quite a bit around us, but we weren't looking as closely as we should have to the warning signs that something's wrong with the abuse and, the different things that eventually come out in these cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of these guys, even when they're confessing to their crimes, they, they can't even bring themselves to be honest at that point when they're already against the wall. And, Albert Fish, he was a child rapist and a cannibal, and he had told police, I guess, that he had children in every state, and that's a quote. And at one time he stated the number was about 100, and, nobody really knows if he was talking about murders, rapes, cannibalism, which one he was referring to there, though. Do you think that he was just trying, I mean, I always wonder this when serial killers give numbers without any kind of backup to who they did this to and all those things. Do you think he was just trying to make himself more notorious than what he was, or was he being honest?
A couple of things come to mind. We had a guy named Otis Toole. He and I can't think of his buddy was, but they were going
Henry
around.
Lee Lucas.
Henry, yeah. Well, they were going around the country. They were serial killers, and at one point he had stated when he was on death row, and that same thing Bundy was doing. When they get close to the meeting they make, that's when they really started talking. And because all they're trying to do is extend, their time on Earth. But he had Toole said that he had passed through Washington D.C. and that he had killed a woman in front of the bus station. And we had a couple open cases, but we never were able to pin that on him. But they're all over the place, and I think it's really even more frightening that people could get away with that. But when you get into the details of what they did and how they did it, you've got strangers getting in the cars with people. Well, they say, well, he looked like he was all right. And like I said earlier, the thing that I heard the most, he seemed like such a nice guy. Well, that's part of the allure of a serial killer, that that they are trying to get you to drop your guard. When you read the Bible about Satan, they said he was one of the nicest looking angels in heaven. Well, nothing's really changed except, we're just seeing more and more of it. But again, we have to watch these warning signs that to kind of, people that get caught, your child molesters, they're spending an unreasonable amount of time with other people's children, and they're alone with them when they shouldn't be. And again, parents have to be parents. And again, when we see something, we got to say something.
I think there's a problem with people trusting their instincts sometimes. Going back to like an H.H. Holmes, there were a lot of opportunities to catch this guy, and people just didn't act on their instincts and better judgment. And he would have been caught many times, just like Albert Fish. But along those lines, Fish, he was able to get away with things because he was preying on children and the poor. And it's kind of interesting, the members of society that crimes are able to fly under the radar against, like a Ronald Dominique in New Orleans, who was able to get away with killing 30-something, homeless people. I mean, it's just the type of thing, or prostitutes up in Alaska with Robert Hansen. That's the type of thing that I think Albert Fish benefited from as well. I mean, we talked about the children. I mean, missing kids all the time, number one. Number two, and again, we're talking about the poor section of society, so he took advantage of that, preyed upon that, didn't he?
Yes. And like I said, it's more of that happening than we really are aware of, because in a lot of cases they go unreported. And then, they find these stockpiles of where several bodies had been stashed. And we're always kind of disappointed when we hear people confess to all these horrific crimes. But the guy Sowell that I was mentioning, he was stashing bodies in his house, and the bodies were starting to decay, and he lived behind a meat factory. And I think Dahmer had a similar situation. And the smell was so bad, you had to ask yourself, well, why weren't they calling the police? Well, they were. When they went back and checked, they were calling the police. In Dahmer's situation with the bodies he had in the bathtub, he just said it was just spoiled meat. And, and the police kind of went on their way. And with Sowell, behind him was a meat factory. He said it was spoiled meat. But usually it's not until, one of the victims will escape and get away that they'll lead the police back to them. And but again, we have to, be diligent and not just give everybody the benefit of the doubt and don't speculate. We need to investigate some of these things because, again, you find out that it's not by accident that they are at every crime scene that's occurring.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the crime museum. You talked about Bundy and the VW Beetle.
Mm-hmm.
Albert Fish in the crime museum. What's the connection there? What was there that kind of was highlighted at the museum, or what is?
I didn't remember a whole lot about Mr. Fish, in that the crime museum is relocating to Tennessee, and a big announcement is coming out about that. But, the thing that kind of annoyed me the most was the fact that he was out of Washington, D.C., and had done such horrific work that he kind of was under the radar. But, again, when you compared what he did with other serial killers, they basically did the same thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Blake, jump in, man. Tennessee, that's your area.
Yep. That's where I was born and raised, and where I continue to live. But I think the thing with Fish, at the time he didn't have a VW Beetle, or he didn't have this, he didn't have that. He had money. The crime that got him caught, the murder of Grace Budd. Her older brother Edward was trying to help the family because they had fallen on some hard times. The dad was, Albert. He was a train porter. So he wasn't making as much money. Well, Fish showed up with all this money and said, hey, I'll pay you $15 a week. In 1928, $15 a week will be equivalent to about $205 a week today. Pretty damn good money for the time. So, of course, Edward jumped at that, and the family immediately lowered their guard as we talked about earlier, and they let him in. And then he's like, I'll start you up next week. But today, let me take your little daughter here to this birthday party. My sister-in-law is having a birthday party down the street at 109th Avenue and whatever else it was. And they walked off, never seen him again. Well, they went looking, Dad went looking, and there was no 109. It stopped. Before then, there was no Frank Howard. That was the name that he used. He was very good about picking out victims with what he did for a living. He was a painter and a designer and stuff, and he would do that kind of thing. And if you go back and look at him, there was a lot of family problems. When he was born, his dad was 75 years old, 43 years older than his mother. One of his brothers had some kind of epileptic seizure fit. One of his sisters had some mental illness. His mother was very odd, did things really strangely. And then other people in his family, uncles were committed, and all that. So there was like a history of severe mental illness there. And when his dad died in 1875, he was sent to an orphanage until his mother got a better job working for the government. Well, while he was at the orphanage, his already fractured mind was, subjected to abuse and all kind of weird sexual things. One of his quotes was, I saw boys do things to each other that I never should have seen. Mm-hmm. So that started all that off. And then, he started out with these homosexual affairs that he had with, like, these correspondence with these people and all that. And then he was literally, like, the most depraved person, I think, outside of, like, Holmes and a couple of the other ones of that time. He knew no bounds. He would rape and kill a boy, rape and kill a girl. He'd torture you. One of the first things he did was he cut a part of a guy's penis off and was going to kill him, but was scared the heat would give it away. So he took some paper and dabbed Vaseline on it, put it on the wound, gave the guy $10, kissed him goodbye, and left him. He never found out if the guy lived or not. It's that kind of mentality that I don't care. Nobody's going to suspect me. He used his appearance to his advantage, as a lot of serial killers do. Bundy, very charming. He gave himself to here. He was so charming. Women loved him. and that was his